So, you know, you've been asked the question, what is pastel? Is it a drawing? Is it a painting? What do you call the thing? You know, and that's always been an issue. So is drawing painting, or is it, what do you think? What do you think?
Painting.
Painting? What makes something painted versus what makes something drawn?
Drawing to me is more linear. Not that there aren't lines in pastels, but painting covers more of the surface to me with color. So.
Do you agree with that? You could have a vignette, which leaves a lot of the empty surface. So it is a question. And I don't know that it will ever be answered, especially now that there are PanPastels, because it truly makes drawing and painting the same thing. You go in and out, and that is what I love about it. Okay, so when PanPastel first came out, I was totally happy collecting thousands and thousands of these sets of different companies. You know, you have to have every color, of course, right? And then you have to find some place and somehow to store them all, and what to do with the dust and all of this stuff. And you spend a fortune on all of these things. And so one more thing comes on the market and you think, no, I can't. But the way they look, the way they are presented, is like a magnet. And as soon as you start using them, you will see how forgiving they are and how easy they are to mix colors. And things don't get cross-contaminated permanently. There is less spoilage. You don't break them when they fall on the ground because there's no reason for them to fall on the ground. I have, and I picked it up and it was like, look at this. So it's really quite a gift. And what I want to do, hope to do, is to show you about the set that they asked me to create. And I don't call it a garden set. I don't call it a landscape set. I don't call it a portrait set. I don't like that because who knows what colors you see? Who knows what colors you want to use or what mediums? So I would never presume that. And my job, I feel, is not to show you a way to draw or paint, but a way to be free and a way to allow yourself to play and discover a tool that I feel really can enhance the way you play in your studio and loosen you up if that's what your goal is, okay? So we're going to get started by me showing you, well, actually one thing up here. About 2008, I started doing some printmaking, and I discovered that I was a terrible printmaker. I had no patience for the tedious things, and I started doing monotype. And if any of you know that, there are no rules with monotype. You can just do it, and it's kind of a way to transfer ink from one surface to a piece of paper, and you can draw on top of that. And somebody brought in some PanPastels somehow, I think, and I started using them and realized, whoa, these things are like chameleons. They can look like almost any matte medium. By that I mean they can imitate watercolor. They can imitate, you know, anything that you need it to. And the ink that I was using was a matte finish. So I thought, whoa, this is incredible. It hides all of my mistakes. And I can use the stick pastels on top of it. Well, then I was told, you know, Degas already found this out, and he was doing monotypes with black ink, and then he would put his pastels on top of it. And until that point, I must tell you that the Pastel Society of America and most of the other societies were not really allowing you to do a monotype with any pastel on top. But then MoMA had a big show, and that kind of blew that away. And they had to admit, wow, if Degas could do it, right, there must be something to this. And why he was doing it was so that he could really expand his vocabulary of textures and mark making. Electricity was coming into the world. At that time, photography was really taking off, and he was seeing things in reverse and seeing unusual compositions. The Japanese were sending in all of their woodcut prints and new compositions, new focuses. People, you know, cutting off the hand off the edge, as you know, about Degas. And so he was doing monotypes so that he could really explore very quickly, lay in the blacks and get color on top of it, and try and explore different colors. Now, many of you may not know what a monotype is, and I'm not going to show you today how to do it, but it's a very simple process and you don't need a press. And the fact that he could make multiples, I'm not talking about a photocopy machine. I'm talking about a hand press that cranks with 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure between a plate with ink and a piece of paper that goes over it, and you squish the ink into the paper or onto the paper, into the fibers of the paper, and it comes out the other end. But when it's called a monotype because when the ink is gone on the surface of the plate, which can be, it wasn't plexiglass at that time, it was a metal plate, a zinc or copper plate. When the image is gone, there is no image left. Okay, so contrary to the idea of an etching, this was no more, there was nothing incised, no permanent marks made on the plate. So that was that you were actually drawing or painting first with the black ink each new time it went through the press. And then coming out the other end was the print, which is a one-off, or maybe you get what's called a ghost, which is a lighter version of that, until the ink is gone, and then you have to redraw the thing. So this is pretty exciting, right? So what happens? I told them that they needed to create mountains because the landscape that we live in has mountains, and that we were in a drought and we needed to have some rain. So I said, Google, use your iPhones, use whatever you have, Google storm clouds, and we're going to make a rainstorm. And they did. And that night, it actually poured. Just a few hours after the class was over. And I mean, they came back the next day and they said, whoa, those pan pastels are powerful. You know, I mean, how could you just like, whoa, be careful what you do with them. Just with torn paper and edges, you have this, you can then go up and apply it lighter and get distant mountains and go again and then even flip it over. You see what can happen? I mean, these could be waves of, you know, waves on the ocean or whatever. And then you change colors. And the changing of colors is the most amazing thing. You take any kind of either bounty paper towel, whatever you have, these are blue shop towels, same applicator, go into another color. What color would you like? Shout out a color.
Purple.
Purple. Okay. If I want to, I can go back into here. I can gradate the colors. I can go directly into another color, mix the colors either in the pan or on the surface here. And so forth, right? So again, every time I dip in, and I'm not being timid, I'm getting enough to cover it, and you can see it. And when you need to, you'll know you have to go back over it, wipe it off, and get some more color. And so if you're an illustrator, if you just want to play with color, if you want to, you know, if you're down one day and you just want to enjoy color and you don't want to make anything, you don't have to. You can just go in there and play. And I swear, it's almost like weaving, and or playing with yarn, or some of you do collage. You know, I often will go and do collage just to get focused. And if you want to make cards and send them out, you can do that. You can add any material on top of this. You can use paint. You could use colored pencil. You can also use stick pastel if you wish. So it is just so forgiving. You can also color your paper, and the back isn't colored, so then you can make these as collage if you wish. So you're only limited by your own creativity. And use odds and ends of paper that you pick up. You can use anything. Okay. So what this is a lightweight printmaking paper. It's a Strathmore 300 series printmaking paper, and it comes in a pad of 30, and it comes in 2 different weights. But you can use any printmaking paper, and every paper that you use will, I can say pretty much, as long as it's not a slick surface like a coated, really hyper slick thing, it's going to accept this PanPastel. And what we were noticing is, as we were exploring in the factory, a smooth surface like this, which is contrary to what many pastelists are using these days, right? Because over the past 20 years, we've been getting these gorgeous papers that are coming out that are very abrasive and sanded and hold a lot of pigment. And so you get to really be kind of heavy-handed with that. And this doesn't use a lot of the pastel themselves have a lot of pigment in them, and they're very brilliant and saturated in color. But you can develop a touch that is very soft and then go right over it with, other materials. But something like a rice paper, have any of you ever tried to use a stick pastel on rice paper? You can't. It will tear it. Have you tried to use that, imagine rice paper wet, and then add a pastel to it? Forget it. It's impossible. Yes, watercolor can go over it, so can PanPastel. So the thinner the paper, or as thick as you want it, or you can use it on an abrasive surface as well. So I'm not saying that you have to give up your surfaces. I'm just saying that what I want to do today is show you just how many ways you can use this stuff. So I was mixing in the pans, and there's really not that much, I haven't changed the color. But now I still have some purple on here, and I'm going to go into the orange. Okay? That should be pretty stunning to some of you. And now what happens, will it contaminate this and make, so I just want to show you. But you can get a two-tone effect. You can actually paint this edge and create marks that are multiple colors, which is very beautiful. When you want to make sure that you have it absolutely clean, then you would scrub it off like that, not tear it, but just scrub it. And then you can go in again and beautiful, simple color. And if you want to, of course, you can keep one just for warms and light colors, and you can be much more methodical than I am. But just look at the variety of marks you can make. So if you're a calligrapher and you enjoy, even just painting music, the sound of music, and, just seeing what you can do with marks. That's what this allows you to do. And there are, hello. In this set, I tried to include ways for you to make all of the tints that you would ever desire through adding white to some of them. You have cool and warm grays to play with and earth colors. So my goal with the set of 40 was really to broaden and give you the option of making any color that you can make, including the opalescence or the pearlescence, and which is a different set, and the metallics. So included in the set will be a little brochure on which combinations of colors will make those. But what I really want you to do is to mix your own colors and to just, it's so simple, you don't have to wait for anything to dry. Okay? And just to be able to make those beautiful marks is really quite beautiful. And then adding charcoal on top of this or colored pencil, everything just works beautifully. This is a Diane Townsend Tirage, and let me show you over this color. So you would think that pastel wouldn't stick to a smooth surface, but it does. And in most of my workshops, I have people work with a very smooth, thin surface to show them that, because we may want to do stuff like scrape through. You may want to make more textures here. And you can get back down to the color below, which is the PanPastel. The PanPastel is not going to move. But you can scrape through an opaque pastel. So the job that you give the stick is to create the opacity. And you can make the PanPastel look more or less opaque. You can and transparent. So it can be this thing that allows you to be like watercolor, and then you can put the you know, in its transparency, but you know that many watercolorists just squeeze it right out of the tube and make it, they use it like an opaque material. And that's what we now have, which we didn't have before, and because of the PanPastel. So does this make sense? The other thing you can do with this that is very difficult to do with regular pastel is to erase. Here, you can erase. That's pretty cool, right? You can soften edges, as you can with the stick pastel, but not quite as easily, just by taking a kneaded eraser and tamping it down. You can, have you ever tried to use a a stick pastel through a stencil? Something like this. The stick doesn't fit through the thing. And you think, why can't I do this? But with the PanPastel, you can. And if it was down on the ground, it would be a little bit easier for me to do, like on the surface of a horizontal table. Okay, so now you have this, whoa, I can combine these things and make things look as posterized if you want to, or as rendered as you wish. In fact, if you're teachers and you're teaching children or adults with charcoal, there is a black and gray set that is amazing. And because it's so forgiving and non-toxic and no cleanup really, other than taking a feather duster and going over this thing outside, it's pretty incredible. Okay, so okay. There is a job for all of the pastels that are on the market. You just have to decide which ones you like the feel of, but don't get limited by that in terms of being able to express yourself with new marks and new ways of drawing. And if you love to draw as much as I do, this is such a gift, because are you drawing, are you painting, doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. Okay.
What tape did you use for the surface, like to make the square? Which tape?
Oh, that's a good question. I love this tape. It's a 3M Post-it. And it comes as, this is not quite 1.5, this might be 2 inches. Yeah, it's 2 inches. And I have to order it, but it's online, removable, and I have found that this leaves no residue. So you can use an artist tape. This isn't cheap, but it's well worth it. And if you wanted to use this to create your marks instead of ripped paper, you can certainly do that. So you get the masking effect of watercolor without having to use a mask, okay? Which is really cool, and you can color paper without having to wet it, and it doesn't curl up. So the dryness is so, this is a dry material that acts like a wet material, which is really cool. You can. Lascaux is probably the best. It's more expensive, but it's because of the aerosol cap, I guess, or the mechanism at the top that gives you a very fine, even spray. So you don't want to use a cheap thing. You don't want to use hairspray that will glob, okay? So what this means is that you can take, I'll pass these around, something as simple as a leaf, and you can, and this is something that I will often do with students, is just say, take something as simple as a real leaf, use it as a stencil, see what you can do. And so as you go through these, you're going to see you know, you should not run out of ideas. This is good squeezing of the brain matter so that it forces you to collaborate with other people. Okay, I'm out of ideas, help me, you know, and then you start thinking more and more and more. And my philosophy is that you don't know what you can do unless you do A, B, C, D, E, all the way to the end. Okay, so if you only do one precious painting, you're limiting yourself. Because then what do? You have to find the next subject. Take the same subject, do it as many ways as you can tolerate, and discover how you can make it new, like someone has not seen it before. Go through all the phases of being a cubist and being an impressionist and do it like, you know, all of these things. And this allows you to do it very quickly. What I'm going to do now is show you an underpainting. This painting is done from life, took about 20 minutes with the model there, and it was done exclusively with PanPastel and a little bit of charcoal. So it does not need to be just an underpainting. The strokes, the marks, the brilliant use of color on white works fine. The only little dabs of the opaque material of the stick pastel was here, and you can tell the difference now, right, between opacity and transparency. We couldn't talk like that before about pastel, and so this is a new way to think about layering and a new way to think about image making. This one is, I think you can see the torn paper here, the stencil use over it, and just no lines at all. Just the use of PanPastel to create a mood, a very simple statement, and just to play with space and shape. So if you look through the book, you'll see exercises in the book that give you ideas like this of how to begin to explore a medium and how to challenge yourself to think differently about drawing. Now I'm going to go to a demo that will show you something like this. This is all PanPastel with Sumi-E Ink underneath. And Sumi-E Ink is, I don't know, you must have it upstairs, but it is a very, very black, I love the smell of it, it's very earthy smell, Chinese ink, and it can be diluted. And you'll see me use that, and then I just went over it with the PanPastels. Here, the white is a white that is highly charged with pigment and also with pumice, so it lays itself down and blots everything out that's behind it. So just a couple marks. So here, there are no real lines in it except a couple of strokes, and the rest of it is just the blend of the Sumi-E Ink and the PanPastel. Okay, this is a brush. Sumi-E Ink is in this bowl, water is in this bowl. Not drawing any outline, I'm not even starting anywhere that you could probably tell. I'm trying to focus on shape. It does not dry shiny. I don't know how many legs we have in here, but I'm not going to worry about that now. Not going to worry about leaving too much white. Okay, we're going to give this a minute to dry. Okay, so that's all it is. It's very calligraphic, and it's just an impression of the horses at this point. And it's not even an accurate distribution necessarily of all the darks and the lights, but I don't need it to be. I have opacity and transparency now that I can work with, and some texture behind it that I can play with, and now I'm free to add whatever I want. So again, this is on the same very lightweight printmaking paper. You can use Reeves BFK, you can use Stonehenge, you can use arches, you can use many, many different kinds. The thing that I like about them that they all have in common is they have different textures, but very little. And so it's easy to move the pastel around. So rushing the process a little bit here, but it's okay. I'm going to show you that we can go right into this with the PanPastel. That's why God made mats, you know, to hide all of this stuff. So the PanPastel over the black looks very different than it does on the white. This is a light ochre. See how that subdues it now? Allows you to try colors, and so what if it's the wrong color? Oh well, do another color. Make a color on top of it. I'm going to use some charcoal, or some black actually. The black integrates with the Sumi-E ink really beautifully. This part of my hand is what I use. There are lots of darks in this set for you that are shades and extra dark shades. So I can even use this to smear some of the opaque stuff that's there. So if I get a line that is too wide here, I have several choices. You can't really, I can erase this, but if I don't want to, I simply go into the negative space and I carve it out and reveal that line. So then I can reappropriate that line in there. Get the right color here. This is a dark purple, and it's a stick. I'll use white. And of course, when you're doing this, you'll have a lot more time. Nobody says you have to do it in a short period of time. So I can really keep playing around with pushing things back, pulling things out. Am I drawing or painting?
Dancing.
Okay, so now we get some more color going on in here. There are no rules. You know, we were told that you had to go dark to light, right? And hard to soft for the pastels. This kind of flips that upside down.
You are using it interchangeably.
I am.
Move to the stick and back to the stick.
Exactly. And I'm looking across this. This is a charcoal that I use a lot. Well, it blends in with everything else. So the idea is to integrate all of these different materials so that you can't tell where one thing starts and another thing begins. All you see is a unified, hopefully, image.
The paper's wet, is it?
You saw the paper was still wet and it was fine. Oh yeah. So think about the, hold on, let me just get this mess of legs figured out, okay? Excuse me. We have some work to do here with the legs. All it's going to take here is a little bit of white and you'll start to see a horse.
Do you write horses?
I don't. I love them though.
Can't tell.
Thank you. So I showed you before the use of the razor blade. Maybe I want to show just the edge of, part of the edge of the face, but not all of it. this is over. I'm putting this on top of all the other junk, and it's still giving me life and light that I need in here, like here, to pull that edge out. Okay. You get the idea, right? So it's a beautiful way to loosen up and just explore using color freely, fast, and if that's what you want to try and do. Yes, this is not a tirage. I love Great American. I'm just going to do 2 more seconds on this and then, so I told you it wouldn't be done, but I do want to show you something. Say I want to get an irregular texture. Charcoal. Okay. Then I can mount it if I want to. Okay, so that was just to familiarize yourself with this material.
On top of the pastel.
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, I could go back in if I wanted to get this darker, even in the only thing I could use or really wanted to use without creating a lot of extra stuff would be the ink. Let me show you. Go right in here. Where's a good spot? Say right here. And that will just dissolve into everything else.
So it dries differently?
Just
Dries the same way it looks now?
yeah. It will, you're seeing a little bit of glare. It will just meld in, right? So, you know, I can't tell you, I'm not a watercolorist, but you can separate layers, you can isolate the layers, you can spray this on top now, outside of course, with a few layers of good fixative and confine that, everything that's here, and then go back over it with more stuff or with other mediums. See, so it depends on what you're trying to go for, you know, how far you want to take a painting or a drawing. Okay, so a bird, and you know, you can do this with anything, but any subject. So I just happen to love animals, but I do everything. So landscape, people, all of it. And this is going to use a few different materials than what I have already used. I'm not going to use the Sumi ink. Instead, I'm going to use the Brayer. Who asked me about the Brayer? Okay, so you'll see what the Brayer does and how I use that, and how, like a wet surface or even the Sumi ink, you don't have to wait for the oil to dry. Otherwise, we'd be here for a while. This is a water mixable oil that I'm using. I'll show you. Let's see here. Oh, I'll show you. Okay. So what I have here, it comes in, many companies make a water mixable oil. It's just cleanup that's very easy. And it comes in a tube. And I put it out. And then on the same paper, this is a Brayer. right? So when I started printmaking, it was a way to rethink everything about what I ever knew about painting and drawing. And it kind of blew me away because I began to think, well, there are many marks that you cannot deliberately draw. There are many textures that you cannot draw. And Degas was finding this through the monotype. So I was learning, just looking, studying his work and trying to understand, well, what material did he use? And so now drawing has expanded for me the vocabulary of how I can make marks to include many printmaking approaches. So I think what I will do is change this from a horizontal to a vertical, and I've just kind of used the charcoal to get me going here. The way the brayer works is, this is called drawing down the ink. It's on a glass surface or a plexiglass surface, and I get the ink in here, and this is in the book. It's called brayer drawing. You can make some beautiful, beautiful marks with the brayer. And my friend Anne here is a wonderful brayer person. And it's kind of a game changer for some people, so watch out, okay? You will start getting intrigued with all kinds of textures and maybe trip on the, so careful on your way out, because you're gonna.
Can you do it with acrylic too?
Yes, this will stay wet. You can add open acrylic. You can, yeah, try it. All of it works. I preferred this because it's easy for me to I can let it out longer than I can right.
Acrylic's a lot slicker too.
The what? The acrylic?
Acrylic's a lot slicker and it dries on your brayer. Really.
And you'd also have to include a matte medium in there to make, unless you wanted a contrast gloss with that. So it's a flat tool. You move it, be a calligrapher, dance with it, make your marks for you, and know that as human beings, we don't have to have every tiny bit of information in there. If there's a reason to put it in, then by all means, you know, if you find you have to do that, go ahead. But I think we as humans really are pretty good about seeing and figuring out what things are with very little information. So I'm just trying to get, what is the spirit of flight? What is the spirit of this bird? And how can I create movement, texture? I'm going to show you one other thing. Set this aside. Okay, this wax paper. Bigger brayer. Few areas I may want to use a different kind of texture. I may want to have, this is a dressmaker's thing, a comb. Just because I may want to, we're just going to keep it simple. Just to get a tone. I can actually use the back side. I can use clay tools or my fingers and deposit a tone of darkness, a tone of black. That's a tree. That's a tree. Okay. I'm going to use, it's called a lithographic crayon. It's a wax crayon. You can use Crayola if you want to, or a better quality crayon. And if you want to have some kind of, here, this is perfect. A placemat that looks like a leaf, right? After the holidays, you go in and you find these things for 50 cents or whatever. And again, the object here is to create some kind of ground that isn't going to move on me. And I rub through. Another reason for me to use the very light paper.
So will that ink still be wet when you start to work on it?
What do you think?
Yes.
Will it matter?
No.
Right.
Matter, you wouldn't do it.
That's right. You're absolutely right. You answered your own question. It's called a lithographic tablet crayon.
Okay.
It's made by Korn, K-O-R-N. Was one of my favorite drawing tools in school, and I love it, but I also love crayons. So you can't move it. You cannot remove it, but the PanPastel can go over it. So all I'm doing is creating a tone here. This is feeling almost like a monotype without being a monotype. This is called Free as a Bird. So you can start with oversaturated color, then move into, then tone it down if you want to. Light over dark, or dark over light. Play with edges, hard edges, soft edges, raggedy edges, itchy edges, you know, all of that stuff. mix up and see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'll put it back. I want a burnt orange. So that was a very, very soft, Great American opalescent. On top of that, I'm putting PanPastel. Okay. Look how blue that looks. It's a blue, not a white. So you can see this is getting very opaque in places. Better get some feet back in there. Back. These beautiful grays that you can make that are transparent are so lovely, and they're all part of the mother color that is now on here, you know, so you're going to be unifying your image with the sponge. And let's get a razor blade. See what we can do, what damage we can do here. I'll end there, just because the music did. But I could keep going, you know? And so it's really up to you when you stop, right? So you saw how fast that is. What else are you going to do with your time? Could you have more fun, really? Go into your studio, play, and do a bunch of them. And then put them up on the wall and see and study which one really speaks to you. Not that you've copied the photograph exactly, but that you have had an experience of painting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.